Hey there, deep divers. Ready to dive in. Today, things might get a little intense, a little bit deep. We're tackling power, seduction, and mastery with Robert Greene.
Oh, a fascinating and sometimes controversial figure.
Right. I mean, you hear those three things together and you're like, wait, those go together. But that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're dissecting Greene's recent interview on the Diary of a CEO, that YouTube channel. And trust me, his insights, well, they're not just for like the boardroom or a fancy date.
This is about the subtle forces that shape our lives, really, every single day.
Exactly. Okay, so to kick things off, Greene says power. It's not about being a dictator.
No, not at all.
It's more about that deep down feeling.
Right, control.
Yeah, that control over your life, your ability to influence others, your future. You ever feel like things are just happening to you?
I think we all have.
That's the opposite of what he's talking about.
And this is where it gets interesting. Greene argues that feeling powerless, that can be even more corrupting than having power. Leads to, negativity, playing games, just a bunch of unhealthy behaviors.
Oh, yeah. It's like that powerless feeling kind of forces your hand, makes you act in ways you wouldn't if you felt more in control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to understand these power dynamics, not to become some master manipulator.
Right.
But to equip ourselves, to navigate the world a bit better.
So let's talk about his book, The 48 Laws of Power. It's basically a Bible for, I don't know, anyone trying to climb the corporate ladder. But here's the interesting thing. Greene himself admits he wouldn't write it the same way today.
That is interesting. The book, it's reached cult status. People like Jay-Z citing it. It's a guide to understanding power. But now Greene's kind of grappling with the ethical side of it. Like, we need to understand the rules of the game, but not become these heartless players.
Right. It's like having a secret weapon but being afraid to use it.
Yeah.
Because of the damage it could cause.
That tension, it's at the heart of Greene's work, I think. He wants us to be aware of power, to understand how seductive it can be.
Right.
But not succumb to its darker side.
Okay, so be smart about how we use this knowledge.
Definitely.
He also talks about, concealing your intentions. He says it can be a powerful strategy, but...
It's not always a sure thing.
No, not at all.
It's about strategy, choosing your moments. If you want to inspire your team, you might share a vision. But if you blurt out every single detail of your business plan...
Ooh, could backfire.
Spectacular.
Yeah. You know when to hold them and when to fold them, right? Okay, but then Greene throws this curveball. He says none of us are above playing power games or having a dark side. He even brings up examples like...
Gandhi.
Yeah, Gandhi. And Martin Luther King Jr.
He's pushing us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, I think. Even these iconic figures, they use strategy, even manipulation sometimes, to achieve their goals.
Wow. So it's like, are we all kind of playing a character? Is there a gap between how we present ourselves and our true intentions?
That's a question each listener needs to think about.
Right.
Greene argues that acknowledging this shadow self,
the not always noble part. Right.
That acknowledging that is actually crucial for personal growth, because it's easy to think, I would never stoop that low. But he's challenging that self-righteousness, I think.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about seduction. And before everyone starts thinking, cheesy pickup artist territory, Greene's definition of seduction, it's much broader than just romance.
He sees seduction as an art form, really. Understanding people, what makes them tick, their desires, their fears, and using that to subtly influence them.
It's like becoming a master of persuasion, but that applies way beyond just getting a date.
Oh, absolutely. A good leader, they can seduce their team into tackling a challenging project maybe, or a salesperson. They can seduce a customer into buying their product.
Okay, but how do you do that without being, manipulative? I'm picturing the sleazy used car salesman. Not exactly inspiring.
It comes down to authenticity. Greene says that true seduction is about connection. Making the other person feel seen, understood. He uses this great example of Errol Flynn, that Hollywood heartthrob.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't he rumored to have seduced, thousands of women?
That's the rumor.
What was his secret?
It wasn't just his looks. People were drawn to his charisma,
Yeah.
That effortless way of making everyone feel comfortable. And he lowered their defenses just by being himself.
So it's not about, tricks or lines. It's about creating a real connection, which makes me think about, dating in today's world. Greene's a big advocate for effort, thoughtfulness in dating, not just, fancy dinners, but actually showing that you care.
He shared this hilarious anecdote about a woman whose date used a discount code on their very first date.
Oh, no. Talk about a red flag. And it wasn't even really about the money, I bet. It was that lack of, I don't know, generosity, feeling like you're being cheaped out on.
Yeah, totally killed the mood.
It's those little details that reveal a lot about a person. You know, have you ever encountered anything like that? Those little things that just make all the difference.
Or plenty.
Yeah, I've got stories, but we'll save those for another time. So, if effort and generosity are key to seduction.
What are the turnoffs?
Right, the big ones.
Well, Greene calls those the signs of the anti-seducer. Preaching, moralizing, and stinginess. Nobody wants to be lectured on a date or feel like they're being cheaped out on, whether it's emotionally or financially.
Right, it's like you attract more bees with honey.
Exactly.
So is it better to be vulnerable then and share your insecurities, or play it cool, be confident?
That's where Greene gets really interesting. He says, vulnerability, that can be attractive because it invites connection. You're letting someone in, you know, showing your human side. But insecurity, that's all about needing validation.
Oh, okay. Big difference.
Huge turnoff.
It's like the difference between saying, you know, I'm nervous because I really like you versus do you like me? Am I doing okay?
One invites intimacy.
The other, that's just seeking approval.
And this goes back to power, too, which is interesting. Because true confidence, that comes from within. You can't fake it. People can sense that desperation.
So we've got to be comfortable in our own skin. To attract others, it's like you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
Which brings us to his book, Mastery, which challenges that whole find your passion myth.
He says it's not some sudden epiphany. It's more about discovering a deep connection to something and nurturing it over time.
So like that whole calling idea, sometimes it's less of a like lightning bolt.
And more of a slow burn.
Yes.
That grows into a passion.
It's about committing to the long game, I guess.
Right. Putting in the hours, embracing the challenges they come with real expertise.
He uses the example of Stevie Wonder, saying even prodigies need to put in the work. Stevie Wonder's, you know, amazing on the piano, but it's because of decades of dedication, not just raw talent. It's inspiring, but kind of intimidating too.
It is.
Makes you think, are we all just slacking?
Maybe a little. Mastery requires more than just passion. You know, it requires discipline, a willingness to push through.
So where do you even begin if you're like just starting out in your career, for example?
Greene actually has a surprising take on that. He suggests prioritizing learning opportunities over chasing the highest salary early on.
Really? Isn't money supposed to be the motivator?
He argues those early years, those are about building a foundation.
Yeah.
So think about it. Would you rather work for a smaller company? Maybe you have more responsibility, you really learn the ropes, or a big corporation where you're just a cog in the machine.
Oh, like small fish in a big pond or big fish in a small pond.
Exactly.
It's about maximizing your growth potential, even if it means
sacrificing a little.
Some immediate financial gain. Wow. Okay, that's a bold statement. It makes you rethink those early career choices.
Hindsight, right. But it's never too late to prioritize learning.
So we've been talking about power, seduction, mastery, pretty abstractly. But Greene's interview gets really personal when he talks about his stroke back in 2018. He talks about losing mobility, struggling with depression, and how this experience really just shifted his whole perspective.
It's a powerful reminder, you know, that even someone who's studied power, strategy his whole life, he's still vulnerable.
It's like we're all human.
We are.
Facing our own battles. But it's inspiring how he found lessons in this.
Unexpected lessons.
Yeah, he talks about the importance of connection, gratitude for the simple things we take for granted, the fragility of life.
Like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. He found a deeper wisdom through it all.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. We all need a minute to process all of that before we dive into part 2. But I'm curious, what's resonating with you so far? What's making you think differently about your own life, your choices, your relationships? Let's take a quick break and we'll come back and explore even more of Robert Greene's insights.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Robert Greene.
Okay, I've had a minute to catch my breath and process all that.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
His ideas really challenge us to look at the world and ourselves differently.
I'm still grappling with that whole shadow self idea. It makes you wonder, like, are we all just playing a game? Are our relationships just power plays?
I don't think Greene's suggesting we become master manipulators.
Right.
You see everything is transactional.
Right, like just because you know the rules of chess doesn't mean you have to cheat
To win. It's about being conscious, ethical.
Okay.
Even knowing those pitfalls helps us make better choices about, how we interact with others.
So not naive, but not like cynical either.
Right.
And I think that's where mastery comes in.
Okay.
If we truly master ourselves, our craft, our path, then we don't need to resort to tricks or manipulation.
It's like that saying, the best con is no con.
Right. If you're really good at what you do, you're confident.
You don't need to play games.
True power from within.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense, but I keep coming back to that whole concealing your intentions thing. How do you balance like strategy with authenticity? It feels kind of slippery.
It all depends on the context.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little mystery can be alluring,
Okay.
especially with like seduction. But in other situations, like building trust, transparency is key.
So you can't have just one approach.
No.
You got to read the room.
Exactly. It takes emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
Reading those social cues, knowing when to hold back, when to open up.
Okay, so let's go a little deeper into Greene's ideas about seduction.
Okay.
I know some people are rolling their eyes right now thinking this is all pickup artist stuff.
Right. But Greene's view, it's much more nuanced than that.
Right.
He describes it as this art form, a way of really connecting with people,
So
understanding their needs, their desires, and reflecting them back.
it's like being a mirror, but in a good way.
Right. You're helping them see themselves more clearly, which makes them feel understood.
And appreciated.
Exactly.
And that can be really powerful, not just romantically, but in any area of life.
Right. Like imagine a boss who truly sees your potential
Yeah.
and helps you unlock it.
That's a form of seduction
It is.
in a way.
It's about that connection, that sense of shared values, shared goals.
Yeah.
And that can be so persuasive, whether you're trying to win over a client, a voter, or a romantic partner.
Greene talks about the importance of effort, of going beyond those superficial gestures. It's not about the size of the diamond.
No, it's about showing that you truly care.
It's like saying, I see you, I hear you, I value you.
And that's so powerful, especially these days.
When everyone's so distracted.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to power, because when someone makes you feel seen and valued, they're empowering you.
Right.
And that's way more effective than trying to dominate or control someone.
It's a much softer approach.
Okay, so we've covered the seductive side, but what about the things that push people away?
The repellent side.
Yeah, what are those?
Well, Greene calls those the trace of the anti-seducer.
Okay.
Preaching, moralizing, stinginess.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be lectured or feel like they're being cheaped out on emotionally or financially.
Right, like you said, you attract more bees with honey.
Exactly.
Generosity of spirit.
And that generosity, it goes beyond just material things.
Right.
It's about being open, present, interested in the other person.
Okay, so we've talked about seduction, authenticity, self-awareness. But one thing I keep coming back to is Greene's emphasis on acknowledging our shadow side.
Right.
It's easy to think of that as negative, but he seems to think it's essential.
It is. It's about embracing all of who we are, the good, the bad, the in-between.
Yeah.
When we deny those parts of ourselves, we're not being authentic.
It's like trying to pretend you're always happy.
Right.
Everyone knows that's not real.
And that forced positivity, it can be more alienating than just being vulnerable.
Right.
When we hide our flaws, we create a barrier.
It makes sense.
We're all human.
We all make mistakes.
And embracing that imperfection makes us more relatable.
You're human.
We're compassionate toward others.
Like, judge not, lest you be judged. Exactly. When we acknowledge our own imperfections, we're less likely to judge other people.
Right. And that compassion, that can be such a powerful force
For good.
for positive change in the world.
Yeah.
When we stop seeing ourselves as separate from others, when we recognize our shared humanity.
That connection. I think that's what Greene's really getting at.
I think so too.
Whether it's through power dynamics or seduction or embracing our full selves, it's all about connection.
More meaningful, more authentic connections with ourselves and others.
Living with intention, with purpose.
And that leads us to the next part of our conversation, which is about mastery.
Okay.
So let's take a brief pause, and we'll come back and explore how to apply these principles.
To achieve true mastery in our lives.
Exactly. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Robert Greene.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, from power dynamics to seduction to that shadow self.
It's been a wild ride.
Yes.
But I think we're ready to tackle mastery now.
Okay, yeah.
Greene's concept of mastery.
It's a fascinating topic. It really ties together a lot of what we've already talked about.
Okay, so before we dive in, I'm curious about something.
What's that?
Well, we've been talking about his ideas on power, seduction, strategy, all these kind of ruthless things.
I see what you're getting at.
But then he talks about his stroke, his depression, his newfound appreciation for simple things.
Right.
It feels like a different side of him.
A more vulnerable side.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, like, how does mastery fit into all of this? Is it about achieving ultimate power, or is it something more?
That's a great question, and I think Greene's experience really shed some light on that.
Okay.
In the interview, he's asked about when he was happiest, and his answer is, well, surprising.
What did he say?
It wasn't about some external marker of success like wealth or fame.
Okay.
It was about when he got the opportunity to write his first book.
The 48 Laws of Power.
Exactly.
Wow, that's unexpected.
It is. You'd think he'd find happiness in, wielding power, not just writing about it.
Right.
But I think it speaks to something deeper. For Greene, it wasn't about the outcome. It was about the process, the journey, the dedication.
So mastery is more about the pursuit than the destination.
Exactly. And I think there's a big lesson there.
Yeah.
True fulfillment, it often lies not in achieving some goal, but in really immersing ourselves in something meaningful.
Finding that life's task, as Greene calls it.
Right, and devoting ourselves to it, to becoming the best version of ourselves.
It makes me think of those artists or musicians who are so dedicated to their craft. They might not be rich and famous, but they have this passion, this fulfillment.
You can see it in their eyes.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but it's also kind of intimidating. Like,
how do we get there?
Yeah, are we all just messing around?
Well, mastery takes more than passion, It takes discipline, a willingness to embrace the challenges.
It's about falling in love with the process, even when it's hard.
Absolutely, because it's in those moments of struggle that we grow, that we learn, that we become more resilient.
Like smooth seas never made a skilled sailor.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive
into Robert Greene,
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Greene's work, it can be challenging. It forces us to confront some hard truths
about ourselves, about the world.
And sugarcoating.
But it's also empowering, I think.
Yeah.
It encourages us to be more conscious, more intentional.
Like, he's giving us this toolkit, but it's up to us how we use it.
Exactly. He's not giving us a blueprint for manipulation or anything like that.
Right.
He's inviting us to step into our power, to embrace our potential, to create a life that's truly meaningful.
So what will you do differently after this deep dive? What insights will you take with you? What changes will you make? The answers are yours to discover. Thanks for joining us.